How can someone claim ownership to a land or a landed property after having occupied the said land or landed property for up to 12 years uninterrupted? 12 years or more uninterrupted? The answer is yes. I'd like you to just listen to this short clip or watch this short clip while I come back. We'll talk about the law of adverse possession with respect to lands or landed properties in Nigeria.
So you don't have money for rent, or you don't have money to buy a house. Let me now teach you how you can acquire a house free of charge legally. Now, when you walk out in any neighborhood and you see abandoned house, any abandoned house, enter inside that abandoned house. Start living there. Just be living there in that abandoned house for just 10 to 12 years. There are many abandoned houses everywhere that nobody has come around to lay claim over. Be there 10 to 12 years. After 10 to 12 years, that place is now your own. Just be praying that the owner of the land or the house does not come and tell you that this is his land. That is called adverse possession. After 10 to 12 years, you are the owner of that land. So even if he comes after 10 to 12 years, he cannot take the land from you. Just plead adverse possession in court. Finish. Immediately court hear adverse possession. Court will say, sorry, it's your land.
And then I saw the need to actually address this issue because I saw the video of my colleague all over the place, and it just gave the impression that if you are in occupation of a land for a continuous period of 12 years, just go and sleep. The land is your own. And I saw the need to further buttress that point as to what you need to prove. And then secondly, to further explain that you cannot apply this principle to government owned properties. And finally, there there's also need for you to show that you were in continuous possession for that period of time, uninterrupted. There was no time within that period that the owner came to ask for his land or came to ask you to lease the land or pay him for the occupation of that land. So I saw that video and I decided to go to clear the air so that people don't just begin to claim. And another thing I also want to point out there too is that for this principle to apply, it's not just that you just have to go and occupy a property and then go and sleep that is your own. It must take effect upon the declaration of the court. It is upon a court order that your ownership to that land becomes sacrosanct. What does the law of adverse possession mean? Adverse possession is a principle of law that states that a person can claim ownership to a land or a landed property by occupying the said property or the said land openly for a continuous period of 12 years and above without interruption. This means that when a person walks into a land or a landed property and begins to live there for a continuous period of 12 years uninterrupted. But when I mean uninterrupted, I mean that nobody comes to lay claim of that land within the period of time that you are occupying the land for a continuous period of 12 years. Then you can go to court. If after 12 years somebody springs up from somewhere and says, this is my property and I want to claim it, you can, if the person sues you or takes you to court to claim his title over that property, you are entitled to claim adverse possession. By the principle of adverse possession, you are now the legal title owner of that property, meaning that the court would look at the circumstances of the case, and if it is confirmed that you stayed there for a continuous period of 12 years and above, nobody came to disturb you, nobody came to lay claim to the land, you have even made some adjustments to the land as your own, the court will look at it and automatically grant you title over that property as your own, as against the original owner of that property. That is how the law of adverse possession operate. Now, that is why most times when my clients buy land or houses, landed properties, I usually tell them to occupy it. Now, there are certain requirements from someone who is claiming adverse possession, the principle of adverse possession over a property in court. There are certain things you must prove, and it is only when you properly, according to the standard of the law, prove these things I'm going to mention now, that is when you will succeed in your claim for adverse possession over that property. One of you were in actual possession. What I mean is that you stayed there, you were living there, or you were occupying that property for that continuous period of 12 years and above. There was no time that you did not stay there. There was no time that you traveled and left it unoccupied, by you. There was no time you traveled and left it unoccupied. You were constantly living in that property for a continuous period of 12 years and above. Open and notorious use. You were using it openly. It was not hidden. Anybody that passes will see you and know that you are living in this property. In fact, the people around there will begin to think that you are the owner of the property when you are not the owner. That's what the law requires. That you must be living there openly and notoriously. Everybody knows you as the owner of that property. You were exclusively occupying that property. By exclusion, I mean that you were not sharing the property with the owner. There was you. It's not like maybe it was a compound that has two apartments, and you were living in one apartment. The owner was living in one, in the same compound for that period, and then one day you just wake up and say that it's now my own. I've stayed here for 12 years and the owner did not say anything. The law, that principle will fail you at that point, and your case will fail, because for the principle to succeed, you must prove that you were in exclusive possession of the land for that period of time required by the law. You were in continuous possession. You were in continuous possession. You stayed there continuously, and then you stayed there without the consent of the owner. The owner did not know that you were there. That's another thing you have to prove in this instance. The owner did not know that you were there. The owner just sprung up after that period of time, after 12 years and above, to claim title over that land. In this instance, if you raise the principle of the law of adverse possession, then you will succeed. Now, if you look at the case of Abdul Karim and Inca Nigeria Limited, in that case, the Supreme Court further established these principles I just listed here now for people to prove before you succeed in your claim for adverse possession. And the Supreme Court further crystallized the fact that upon one's continuous occupation of a property for a period of 12 years and above uninterrupted, then that person can claim title to that property based on the principle of adverse possession. And this is why I usually tell my clients who have bought land that I am aware of, probably by virtue of my position as a legal practitioner, I supervised and saw them through the process of the sale. I tell them to make as much I tell them to try as much as possible to occupy the land. Now I'm going to make a short video after now to explain how one can occupy a landed property in order to protect his interest over that property. I also want to point out that this principle of adverse possession also applies in some countries like the UK and the US, but its application in those countries differ. For example, in the UK, for the principle of adverse possession to apply, the land must be either a registered land or an unregistered land. With respect to a registered land, the period of time is 10 years, but for an unregistered land, the period of time is 12 years. And for a registered title, the owner must have been notified, and he did not do anything for at least 2 years before you can now claim that property as yours based on the principle of adverse possession. So this principle applies in most of the countries of the world. It's just that its applicability differ depending on the legal system that governs that jurisdiction. I hope you found this video helpful. So if you have bought a landed property and you have not done anything to it, you have not occupied it in any way, kindly rush now and occupy your property, just so that you won't begin to hear stories that touch in future. Kindly subscribe to this channel if you are yet to subscribe, and share this video to everyone that you know would it will be helpful to, and don't forget to give us a thumbs up. Thank you very much for having me, and enjoy the rest of your day.